Okay, so we've finished with the basic mapping of proportions. Here's a preview into what's to come. This would be the roadmap so far. Each step does something very concrete and very objective so that you can make assessments about your work or change it. We just did step 5, which was proportions. So that step just allows me to focus on that competency alone. And now what I would use that to do is start to transition into understanding the side plane of the head. So we've done all the big setup. Step 5 really is the last of that. What I mentioned earlier was that one proportional marker that's important but is often not included in 5 is the hairline. And it's because there's too much play there. Some people have one, some people don't. Sometimes the hair lines up with where I'm looking for on the skull and sometimes it doesn't. But if you can just find that area, general area, what I'm really looking for here would be the hairline represents a moment in the skull where we would have the front of the head become the top of the head. That's the inherent value of this step for me. So, when I'm looking at hairline, it could be here, could be lower, could be higher. There's a lot of play, but what it means is that this is when the forehead stops and then the top of head begins. The reason that's crucial or important for our next step, which is understanding a side plane, or we could say our first form cut, is that if you take this line and throw it all the way back, so just relate that to the back of your large sphere, this is a consistent change of surface and texture in your skull. Above this, your skull is rounded and very kind of dome-like. And then as soon as you hit that line, it becomes sheer and concave. What I'm looking to cut out here is what's called the temporal fossa, which is this big cutout on the side of your head where one of the two muscles of mastication sits. So it's one of the two muscles used to eat. If you call 150 pounds per square inch eating, you weaklings. So in this step, what we would look for is 4 points. Hairline, base of nose, which you have. That establishes the height of your temporal fossa. The other two would be the width. So and the other 2 points would be temple and then back of skull. So where's the temple? Oh, it's like right there. So I'll just cite that. It looks like it's right here. And then back of skull could just be the back of my shape. Once I find these 4 points, it's kind of what I was discussing earlier. Now I take this out. This becomes extruded. So for me, drawing is not about the organization of space as much as it's about sculpting. What this step means to me is that I started with this very simple geometry, which we discussed, the pros and the cons of it. And then now it's time to start to plane it in order to make it more approximating or more approximate to my reference. So this step is about shaving this. It's taking away. And that's very much what the rest of this approach will look to create is cuts and additions. So we can get rid of that now, or you can throw it away. But what I'm left with here is a sheer plane that's much more like what the skull would be. So can you see now how if we were to start with an egg, we would have saved ourselves some time? Here's a shape or a form that is more sympathetic to the skull. It already started with this front and with, a side that gradually broadens and is perhaps a little bit sharper. That's the trade-off, right? The more direct versus less so. From this, I get my ear, my cheekbone, which could be any way that you want to design it, and my jaw. So here, once I have my plane, I cut it into quarters. So there's 4. Not that this is always the case, but I find that pretty consistently the ear lives in this back quarter. And then, I'll start by making the ear a simple C, but most ears are 5 planes. And that what I try to do when I look at different people is start with that C and then look at the difference in length. So it's always, like I've been saying, what's universal or what's unifying about a face or a part, and then how can I use that knowledge to study and develop an appreciation of variety. So the variety would be trimming and extending and distorting those lengths. So this gets my setup. The bottom of the ear covers what would be called the temporal mandibular joint and the auditory meatus. That looks like a little 8 there. That's where your jaw begins. So now, instead of having, again, let's go back to our big skull setup. Instead of having a big bulbous balloon or basketball head with this rounded jaw, I don't want that either. This is just a setup to now get more custom. Now that becomes almost like a framework or training wheels for me to be more decisive. What is the angle of this person's remus mandible? Is it more angular and straight, like I was mentioning in the gender differences? Is it smoother and less of a break? If this is just kind of your average, you could invent it and nudge it in any direction. So this would become now my 2 lines for the jaw. And then as far as the cheek, right? So I've done the ear and the jaw. There's any number of gradations for this. The Andrew Loomis solution would be, let's take the top of the ear and swing it down on a big C curve to land at the corner of the chin. It's a bizarre solution. It's fascinating because it's nowhere near where the cheek is, but what it gives you is a great rhythm that establishes a side plane. So now what we've done is we've taken this weird bulbous jaw shape and we've made another cut, and now we could take that off. It's more akin to something that would come out of the Riley school, and that's how Loomis described rhythm more in his book, right? Was a relationship between parts. His discussion of rhythm is kind of related to contour and feature, and there's 3 types of rhythms, and they relate different parts of the body. So it makes sense in that context. What I like to do if I'm studying the cheekbone is I just rest that glasses, or that, this would be the frame, on top of the TMJ, the temporal mandibular joint. This part of your cheek is what allows for that jaw to work, right? One way that you could try to put that into evidence for yourself is just touch this area, right? Touch right in front of this area on your body. If you touch right here and then open your mouth, what you'll feel is this little ball moving forward. So the opening of your mouth is it's not just a hinge. One movie that sticks with me is The Mummy with Brendan Fraser. The mummies are the scary creatures, and their mouths just kind of drop straight down. That's not what ours does. Ours swings forward and then back. And that's why it would be great to have like a Proco skull or another little skull that you could reference. And so when you're looking at this area, there's like a little wobble. So you can make the glasses and then do like a little wave in it, so that you think when this opens, it's going to shift and drop in there. And then maybe you could do like a little temple shape, a little S curve that would build into your brow. Maybe you also want to turn the corner and try to show the front of the lens on the glasses. My teacher, John Watkiss, had a kind of a cool summary somewhere between Andrew Loomis and what I did that's more expressive of the bone, where he found plotted marks to develop rhythm in there. But you can have any solution. It should be creative and open to your interpretation of how you want to make these things start to look and read. But that would be kind of step 6. Step 7, I start to develop the sockets, right? And I'll show you again, different ways that you could think of this. Some people like to do this big cut that looks like Cyclops from the X-Men. The value of this is that you can start to, make a connection to the idea that your sockets as a whole have a different lean. Forehead comes out, sockets go back. But nobody's sockets look like this. Instead, mostly what I see people draw, sometimes I used to do this at the beginning of classes, just ask people, draw a skull from imagination. Let's see how well you know what the skull is. Every person drew the Terminator skull or the Punisher logo, the most pissed off skulls on the planet, right? So that would be a more organic way to see the cutback of the sockets. This is a cool solution because if you pull that up, you would get for free the plane changes of the forehead, that goes straight. This leans consistent with that drop. And so you could hopefully quickly see how we're starting to develop some space or some architecture. But here's how that nose would start to form. This would be a summary of all of the cartilage of the nose and the nasal aperture. Sometimes I'll do something like this, even if I want to study the skull, and then I'll come back in and start to investigate. Oh, that's actually like a useful grid to think about what the nasal aperture might look like from this view. I used to collect magazines on rhinoplasty when I was in college. It was really popular with the ladies with that. But that way you could kind of see the visual of plastic surgery, kind of what the structure of the nose looks like in there, and cheekbone on this side. And then we'll start to add our denture sphere, step 10. And that's really the kind of the big, let's say, secondary development of masses and perspectives in terms of the features. What is the denture sphere in terms of the orientation of mass? What do the teeth contribute to the face before I put lips on? That way my lips don't look like this. I'm forced to understand them as on top of and participating with the surface. And then chin. And that's getting us near kind of an average construction, an idealized perspective skull. And then once done here, what I like to look at last would be features, or let's say specifically fat. So the fats of the face, the subcutaneous pockets and deposits of fat. So around your eye, you have 5, right? Or maybe even some of the facial anatomy. Like instead of discussing the eye, what's interesting to me is the canthal ligament. How often have we heard this, right? Well, what's interesting about the eye? Well, the eye isn't interesting because there's an iris and a pupil, even though this is what I always see people draw. I always see most beginning drawing students do this, and then it's always weepy, a little nicely modeled tear. What's more interesting to me is the angle. So what you'll notice is everybody's eye is at a different tilt, and this is your canthal ligament. This is what straps the eye in place. We often use this to assign aesthetic beauty to a face and to an eye. Like you could probably remember like a pinup, exaggerated kind of pinup character or cartoon character, how there's always for a beautiful character this uplift area to the ligament or the lash or the eye. That's considered quote unquote beautiful. This would be neutral. This would be less so, unfortunately for me. And part of what creates this is fat. Women have more roof fat, which stands for retroobicularis oris fat. Why is that considered beautiful? Maybe because it hides all the hard surface of the skull? I don't know. But it seems to be consistently accentuated with makeup and the uplift of that lash. So this is the roadmap, and there's lots to digest and put together. But what I'm looking to give you or deliver some perspective blueprint that you could use to push out whatever invented or imagined or observed figure that you would like, and have some structure to understand and orient light and shadow. This is the roadmap for the idealized average I'm looking to give you.